Good evening, viewers. My name is Peter, but you may know me as the Berkshire Mainline. Today, Michael and I are going to be modifying this DeLorean from Back to the Future Part 3 so that it can run on railroad.
Peter! You gotta come back with me!
Where?
Back to the future!
Well, wait a minute, Doc. What are you doing?
I need fuel! Go ahead, quick, get in the car!
No, look, Doc, I just got here. We're going to take this DeLorean and turn it into a railroad time machine. I mean, where are we going anyway?
The movie theater! They were showing Back to the Future and we just missed it! Come on!
Hey, Doc, you better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Great Scott! You're right. Is that better?
Yeah, looks good to me. Let's go.
Back to the Future is one of the most iconic and memorable films ever made. Released in 1985, it tells the story of Doc Brown, a mad scientist who invents a time machine, and Marty McFly, a teenager who gets stuck 30 years in the past. And look, if you haven't seen Back to the Future, what are you even doing? Please go watch it before you watch the rest of this video, otherwise you're going to find it very confusing. Anyway, long story short, Back to the Future is back in theaters for its 40th anniversary, and Peter and I are going to go see it in a few days, but first, I thought it would be fun, since this is a model train channel, to recreate the train scene from the end of the third movie. The plot of Back to the Future Part 3 involves Doc and Marty getting stuck in 1885 with no gas to power the time machine, so they have to use a train to push it up to 88 miles an hour. I decided to do this in G-scale for two reasons. First, big train more awesome, and second, I found a die-cast DeLorean with working lights that's about the right size. In the movie, these lights only come on when the car reaches 88 miles an hour and it's about to time travel. So, in addition to adding G-scale railroad wheels, I thought it would be fun to rig up the model so that when it reaches 88 scale miles an hour, the lights come on. To that end, I decided to replace one of the axles with an electric motor so that as the wheels spun as it was pushed down the track, it would generate electricity and that could be used to measure the speed.
In case you ever want to do this yourself, here's how you drill a hole in the middle of a Bachmann Big Hauler pilot wheel set. First, you pop the little plastic piece out. Next, you chuck it in a drill, start the drill running. Dremel, cutting wheel. That creates a depression in the center. Now, drill bit, you can either have this on another drill, or in this case, just attached to a screwdriver handle. Let it guide itself to the center, and then press in. There's your starter hole. Now you can drill however far in you need to from there. If you're gonna go all the way through, I recommend doing it while it's still chucked in the drill and spinning. And there we go.
The next step was to take apart the DeLorean. I soon ran into a problem. The gauge of the wheels was too narrow to fit in the car frame. The reason for this is that G-scale track represents narrow gauge, while the track in the movie was standard gauge, so even though the car is the correct size, the wheels have to sit further in from the outside than they did in the movie. I used the Dremel to cut some plastic off the chassis for better clearance, and with the wheels mounted on each end of the motor shaft, I glued the motor in place. In the front of the car, I did basically the same thing, except instead of a motor, I just put the original axle through a piece of brass tubing. Now I had to figure out how to make the voltage generated by the spinning motor actually activate the lights, and this ended up being a little bit more complicated than I had envisioned.
So right now we have the dynamo hooked up to the power supply of the lights, and the buttons just bridged across, so the lights will stay on as long as there's power. The polarity is so that when the wheels spin forward, it should provide power to the lights, and this indicates the voltage that's being generated. So I'm going to use the Dremel to spin the wheels. So that's 2.5 volts. That's not enough to bring the lights on. Let's turn it up. Okay, so that brings the lights on. Takes about 4.5 volts. That is going to be a lot faster than 88 scale miles per hour. I have not measured it, but I am confident of that. If we look at this Dremel, the specs, 25,000 revolutions per minute. I will run some numbers on that, but I'm pretty sure, also, we're only using half of that. Okay, so I've run some numbers. And if my calculations are correct, it would need to be pushed at 351 real miles per hour. So suffice to say, we're going to have to find another solution.
It was clear that using the motor to actually generate the electricity powering the lights wasn't going to work. So my next idea was to power the lights off of the battery as they were before and just use the motor to switch them on.
Okay, update. It is now a completely different configuration. There is a little transistor in there, which you probably can't see, but trust me, it's in there. When you spin this, and you spin it fast enough, the transistor basically acts as a switch that closes, activates the button, and the lights come on. Problem is, I don't know what scale speed that is. So, Sharpie, make a mark on the wheel, and then film it with a slow motion camera, calculate the number of frames it takes per revolution, and calculate the speed from that. This is going to take a little bit of math, so feel free to fast forward. I set my phone to 8 times slow speed and it outputs a 30 frames per second file. It took 11 frames for the wheel to make one full revolution, which is 0.366 seconds. Now the wheel is 24 millimeters in diameter, times pi to get the circumference, that's 75.4 millimeters, or almost exactly 3 inches. Very convenient. That puts the actual speed at about 8.1 inches per second. But don't forget, that's at 8 times slow speed, so it's actually 8 times that, which is 64.8 inches per second. That's 3.68 miles per hour, which times 22.5, because it's G-scale, equals 82.8 miles per hour. That is pretty damn close, and I am certainly more than happy with that, especially considering that this car isn't exactly G-scale, it's just pretty close to it. So within the margin of error, I think 82.8 miles an hour is plenty close enough. So now I'm just finishing up the last touches. I Dremeled out the fenders to make room for the wheels, tidying up these wires with some hot glue. Then we've pretty much got a G-scale DeLorean that turns on its lights at 88 scale miles an hour.
With the car done, or so I thought, I turned my attention to the locomotive. I decided to use a Bachmann big hauler for this, because there really aren't any other affordable options for a G-scale 10-wheeler. It looked the part, but it would turn out to be a major problem actually getting it to 88 scale miles per hour.
Alright, so we know that this locomotive will not reach 88 scale miles an hour under normal circumstances. No big surprises there. But I want to see what it would take to actually get it to that speed, because I want it to go fast enough to make the car activate. So, this is a boost converter. This takes a fixed input voltage, converts it to a variable output voltage controlled by this potentiometer right here. So what we're going to do is turn this on. We're going to start with about 12 volts and then slowly crank it up and see how long it takes to get to 88 scale miles per hour. And to measure the speed, I'm just going to use the car itself, touch the wheels like this so that they are effectively turning at the same speed as they would be if they were both on the same track. So I'm going to slowly increase the voltage. That's 15, 17, 20, 22, 24, that's the rated maximum voltage for this motor. We're still not there yet. 26, 28, 30, 32, 33, 34, come on, 36, 37, 38. It's just not going to work. There it goes, 40 volts. All right, let's ramp it back down. I can definitely smell the motor a little bit. That is not going to work. That is a speed that I'm pretty sure would cause this thing to fly off even a straight piece of track, much less a curve. This is just not designed to go anywhere close to 88 scale miles an hour, and frankly, I don't blame it, because this is a model of a locomotive that would probably never see over 30 miles an hour in its lifetime in real life. But that does mean that we're going to have to find a different solution to this problem.
So clearly a compromise was needed. Now obviously I could have just rigged it with a remote control so I could turn the lights on whenever I wanted, but I didn't want to do that. That felt like cheating. I wanted the lights to actually be activated by the car reaching a certain speed. That speed might just have to be a little bit lower.
All right, so what I had to do was replace the motor on the axle with a different one that will generate more voltage for a given speed, which means now I can spin this axle at a fairly modest pace and the lights will come on quite easily. So another little quirk of this new DeLorean setup is that these wheels are no longer connected. This one's connected to the motor, this one just freewheels on a bearing because this wasn't a double shaft motor, so I couldn't mount them that way. Anyway, 12 volts, 14, 15, 18, 20, 24, come on, 29, still higher than I would have preferred. It's 3:48 a.m. I think I'm starting to lose my mind. I've just pulled the motor, or rather the generator, out of the DeLorean for the third time? Fourth time? Second time? I don't know. None of these motors are generating enough voltage for the lights to come on at anything close to a reasonable speed. Anyway, I'm starting to feel the onset of this project not being fun anymore, and we're rapidly approaching the deadline. Well, technically we've already passed the deadline when I was hoping to have it done by. I want to release it on some day that's relevant to Back to the Future, like November 5th or whatever. I may have to push it to November 12th, the day that they go back to 1985. At this point, it'll be a miracle if the video ever gets done at all, if I'm honest. I've had to cut the frame of the car quite a bit because gluing these motors in and then pulling them out again pretty much completely destroyed it. You can see the remains of the piece of styrene that was holding the last one in. I've lost most of the screws. I'm going to go to bed and hope that when I wake up, somebody else has made this work for me.
One eternity later.
All right, folks, I have some very exciting news. After yet another late night of working on this, I have now swapped yet another motor into here. And this one, spoilers, works. You may also notice you can hear some steam engine idling sounds. That's because I went ahead and installed the Blue Nami decoder that we're going to be used to be remote controlling this, which means we will have sound. All right, hold up the wheel. Watch the lights. It works! I finally invent something that works! Now you may be wondering, well, how fast was that in scale miles per hour? And I was wondering that too. So I used the same technique with the camera and counting the frames that I used earlier on the car to measure the speed of the locomotive's wheels. And it turns out, the speed at which the lights activate is about 32 scale miles per hour. Now that may not sound like much, but consider the movie. On screen, you're not seeing the locomotive go 88 miles an hour. The locomotive in real life is not capable of anywhere close to that. I think it tops out around 50 depending on who you ask. What you're actually looking at on screen is a locomotive going about 30 miles an hour. And in scale, that's what this does now. So while it may not match the number that's shown on the speedometer, it does actually match the speed that the train is going in Back to the Future Part 3.
With this new setup, I was able to dial down the voltage on the boost converter to around 20 volts, which was comfortably under the limit. It was finally time to set up some track and go Back to the Future. I must apologize for the crudity of this layout. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
Peter, unfortunately, was not able to make it today. He had a previous appointment at school being yelled at by Mr. Strickland for being a slacker. So here is the locomotive, and you will notice it has smoke. This is technically not smoke, however. This is a new version of my water-based smoke units that I made a couple of years ago, and this will get its own video pretty soon, but that is not all. If I remove this, there are LEDs inside, which gives a pretty convincing fire effect. And that's not all either. If I pop this in here, boom, green smoke, just like in the movie, and we also have yellow smoke, just like in the movie, which actually makes an even more convincing fire effect. And then when the red log explodes, then the whole smokestack pretty much explodes. So that's just the full-on fire effect with all the lights. Unfortunately, there's not really any way to simulate the explosions that happen when each log fires without completely destroying the model. So instead, I'm just going to run after the train as it's going and switch these out by hand. On the front here, we have a new 3D printed cowcatcher with the tire holder to cushion the DeLorean as it's pushing it. These are actual tires off of the original die-cast DeLorean model. I did not 3D print those. In the back, we've got custom decals for Central Pacific number 131, modeled directly off of those in the movie. And we have a wood load in the tender, which is real wood. I cut up a bunch of sticks from the yard. And then we've got the number 131 on the cab and on the sand dome as well. And on the smokebox front, that is a 3D printed and hand-painted piece. This headlight is also 3D printed. Bachmann does make a similar box headlight, but I didn't have one, so I went ahead and printed this, which is actually closer to the one in the movie. And then, of course, as you probably guessed, the stack itself is also 3D printed. The rest of this is pretty much just a normal Bachmann big hauler. This is actually the same one that starred in my Casey Jones documentary. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend watching it. It's one of my favorite videos that I've ever made on this channel. And I'm aware that the Bachmann big hauler is not an accurate model of Sierra Railway number 3, the real locomotive that was used in Back to the Future, but it's the closest thing available in G scale. And now it is full up on water and ready to play its part in the movie scene. And the sound, of course, is Blue Nami. I wanted to do that all my life. I've also tuned the Blue Nami settings so that the speed required to activate the lights on the car equals 88 speed steps, so we can use this as a speedometer.
What did I tell you? 88 miles per hour! Ow! It's hot. Damn hot.
Don't worry, folks. My hand is fine. The car's right here. What you just saw was nothing more than a little bit of movie magic and special effects. I didn't actually rig this with a real flux capacitor. I was planning to, but I looked it up and they're like $80, and that's a lot of money. People have died over that amount of money, and that just seemed a little bit dangerous, so I decided instead it was best to just fix it in post. After this, I met up with Peter again, and we finally went to the theater and saw Back to the Future. Although I've seen this movie dozens if not hundreds of times, it's a whole different experience to see it on the big screen, and we had a truly fantastic time. If it's still playing in theaters where you are, I highly recommend catching it while you can.
There it is.
Got a poster.
Yep. All ready to go.
Back in the DeLorean and head home.
Anyway, that about wraps up this video. It's hard to overstate how much these movies mean to me and how much of my personality I've based on Doc Brown. Thankfully, I'm not the only one for whom the Back to the Future movies have brought so much joy, and that, as a great man once said, is the power of love. Thanks for watching, folks. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.